share a little bit about my journey, which began around January of 2020, a few months, 2 months before the lockdown in March of 2020. But since that time, I've lost over 50 pounds, and I've done so through a gradual, methodical process that I used to integrate that I integrated into my life. I'm a spouse and a parent, and for the bulk of the last, let's say, I don't know, 10, 12 years, I've been an educator. I've been an instructor. I've been an academic advisor. I've been a researcher. I've managed programs. And I've been really fortunate. And so during the pandemic, I went through a difficult transition from a teaching role that I cherished into unknown territory that would eventually lead to a research opportunity. But the moment in which I was confronted with this transition was also the moment when the pandemic lockdown began, and it was also the moment when I was 2 months into another attempt to lose weight, where I had actually lost about 10 pounds at that point, but I was on the verge of falling off the wagon once again. And so it was a convergence of all of these things that really prompted me to stay the course. I had reached an inflection point where I thought, there's so many things coming at me at once, so many things that are out of my control. But the one thing that I can control at this moment, that I know that I can control, is what I decide to put in my mouth and what I do with my body. And so I thought, well, I've tried this weight loss thing again, and it's worked, but is it sustainable? How will I know unless I try, unless I take the next step, go where I haven't gone before? And so it was in March 2020 that I decided that I was going to try a different approach, which was to cut back on a lot of unhealthy foods, not rely on my comfort foods for stress relief, particularly in a moment of high stress. And I think for me, a point of no return came shortly after the pandemic started. And this is relevant to the topic of today's podcast episode, which is it's based off of a recent blog post that I entered in the blog at the thepandemicpushup.com. And the blog post focused on stress and wellness and how that is really an ongoing struggle for so many of us. But I had reached a point of stress early on in the lockdown days where I remember it was one night in late March, and my eldest, who was still in elementary school at the time, was just having a bad day, transitioning to, doing school from home, and I'm still teaching from home, finishing up the semester. And my partner's also working from home, and we at the time, our infant, who had just become a toddler. It was a crazy time, and there was just this one night where there was just so much screaming and raging, and I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, how are we going to survive this? I need to do something. I just need to get out. And it was quite late too. So I got in the car and drove about 25 miles, and just not sure where I was heading or what I was doing. I was just at a point of exasperation. I was just exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and maybe even a little physically. and I ended up in a fast food drive-through, one of my go-to fast food places, and I got one of my typical orders. And I knew that, okay, I had just said, now I'm going to, try something new. But here I am sitting in the parking lot with this drive through order. And I just, I started drinking that soda, and I took a bite of one of the fries, and I looked at it, and I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and I just started thinking, like, what am I doing? I I've got to accomplish something. Right now, it seems like nothing is working. Again, this is late March of 2020. I'm on the verge of, finishing my contract without a renewal. Um, Children are at home all day. One is supposedly at school, but the school system doesn't really know what it's doing in terms of having to abruptly switch to online learning. My partner, as you can imagine, is quite worried about everything, and I'm just a mess. And I just thought, at that moment, I thought, look, I wiped the tears out of my eyes, and I said, look, man, I've got to give this a try. I've got to earnestly give this a try. And it was, for me, it was a critical moment where I thought, what is going to happen if I continue on this health journey, and I really experience it, and I really try to get away from these food health choices, and discover new ones, discover ones that involve actual healthy foods, on a daily basis. And I give myself weeks, days and weeks to document what I eat, and to see the difference in what I'm eating, and my daily activity. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a moment of stress, really an inflection point for me, where I said, okay, I'm going to earnestly give this a try. And from there, I went through, as most people did during the pandemic, peaks and valleys, so many highs and so many lows. And with the strength that I had from, my family, and from my inner willingness to go where I haven't gone before, but also with an openness to information that's been there for so long, information about health and fitness, information about the importance of managing stress, and how stress can lead to chemical changes in the body, how stress can trigger uh, trigger desires for foods that it may not be as healthy for the body. There's a hormone that's released, um, called cortisol, that is heavily discussed in the health community. But this hormone, which is actually important for the body in terms of how it communicates, the organs and tissue and muscles, and blood, it's a critical hormone. But if there is too much stress, then that hormone reacts in a way where it can release way more insulin than the body needs. And this can create all sorts of health risk, for a person that is dealing with